Really just a pause and certainly preventing any further escalation of tariffs. I've long said that these dueling tariffs are hurting workers, businesses, and consumers in both countries, because in a trade war of dueling tariffs, there are no winners, only losers. So the only positive in this is that the tariffs certainly imposed by the United States on Chinese goods will not go up. Some of them are being reduced, but virtually two-thirds of all Chinese products entering the United States still face tariffs. And that is a burden on American businesses and American taxpayers. So I'm glad that there is a pause and in some cases a reduction of the tariffs. And of course, hopefully there'll be a reduction of some of the Chinese-imposed tariffs on American goods so that these highly valued, in great demand American goods can reach the Chinese people to help improve their quality of life. But the big issues still remain, and that's what the negotiators really need to focus on, some of the structural issues that have long been the complaint of not just American companies and American businesses, but other firms from around the world.
And speaking of structural changes, it sounds like at the end of these negotiations, China really did not give in to U.S. pressure to make any commitments on changing it. Do you think that is something that still needs to be addressed going into phase 2 negotiations?
Well, China did make commitments to further open some of its markets to international businesses, and of course it has long wanted to do that anyway, and had already made some steps to open up, for instance, the financial services sector. China had already dropped the requirement that in some manufacturing sectors that foreign firms would no longer have to have a Chinese partner. But some of the issues still remain in terms of government subsidies to state-owned enterprises or to certain sectors, which is really unfair and contrary to world trading rules. And of course, the whole notion of forced technology transfer. The Chinese have said that under this phase 1 deal that firms will not be forced to share their technology, but will they almost have to as a condition of having a joint venture. So while the government may not force that transfer of technology, will the day-to-day business arrangements almost require that? So that's something that needs to be watched very carefully.
What does this phase 1 agreement mean for your state, Washington State, where it's headquarters for Boeing, Starbucks, as well as Microsoft?
Well, certainly the commitment by the Chinese government to purchase more American goods and services over the next 2 years is welcome news for Boeing, because quite frankly, Chinese airlines have halted making any orders over the last several years during the trade dispute. So if anything, this will lead to a resumption of those sales and orders of Boeing airplanes. Of course, there's a huge backlog for Boeing airplanes, and these any planes that the Chinese airlines order even next year or 2 years from now will not be filled, will not be made for maybe 4 or 5 years from now. But certainly it means a continuation of employment for Boeing workers, and that's good news.
And with tariffs remaining on most goods U.S. buys from China, how soon can really people, manufacturers, farmers see the benefits?
Well, while farmers are going to benefit, they will see their sales of commodities resume their historic levels in terms of sales to China, and perhaps go above that. But in some cases, commentators are saying that it simply means that instead of selling soybeans to the EU, some of those soybeans will flow to China. So it's questionable as to how much more farmers will produce and how much more income they will have. Certainly they will not have the surpluses that they've had for the last couple years during this trade war. So it looks like a resumption of output for farmers and maybe a little bit more, which is good for them. But the average American household is still facing tariffs on two-thirds of all Chinese goods. It's costing the American household anywhere from $600 to $1,000 more per year on average that they're paying because of these tariffs. And while some of the tariffs have gone down, these tariffs remain. And so it's still going to be a burden on the average American consumer.